Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have full review of the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 6. Let's get started. This is Samsung's newest foldable, so we're going to find a slight improvement over the last generation. It honestly seems to be a bit more refined, but it keeps a lot of the essence of the past generation, only adding software novelties that the past generation will also receive with an update anyway. So honestly, it is not so attractive to evolve from one generation to another, but if you have the Z Flip 3 or previous elements or are looking to release your first folding, it can be a starting option. In Mexico, its launch price has been 24,999 pesos, like the vast majority of folding in this format today in the Mexican market. This for the base version of 256 gigabytes storage. But there is a version with double the storage at 27,999 pesos, just for your consideration. On screen, you were seeing the reference price in dollars to give you an idea. But remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. One of the advantages of being a Galaxy is that it has good distribution in both physical and online stores, so you decide where you want to buy it. Obviously, different distributors might also have a bit more promotions and offers, so that could be a strong point against its competitors, which are mainly two, the Motorola Razr 50 Ultra and the Oppo Find N3 Flip. We start by talking about the design. In this case, with the device folded, we are going to find a folder-shaped screen very similar to the last generation. In a moment, I tell you more details about this screen, but for now I tell you that it comes with a Gorilla Glass Victus 2 protection. In this case, we do not find Gorilla Armor, and it is somewhat annoying because Samsung already premiered this glass in the Galaxy S24 Ultra, but has not placed it on this device, which is a more recent release. That glass would allow us to have less reflections, so we will have to wait to see if until the next generation Samsung decides to incorporate it. A small aesthetic change is that now the rings will have a colored outline, but as I say, it is only a small aesthetic change. On the right side, we are going to find power button that at the same time is fingerprint reader, quite thin. There are also the volume buttons and plastic bands to help the connectivity of the antennas. On the left side, we find the tray where we can place the nano SIM card, and at the bottom we will find two microphones in addition to the USB-C port and the new design of only one perforation for the speaker. On the top, we are going to find another two microphones, and all with plastic bands to help the connectivity of the antennas, as all this frame is made of aluminum armor, as Samsung usually calls this material, which is quite resistant. In fact, I think that in terms of resistance, we are in front of a device with good capabilities, since also on the back we will have glass, but with Gorilla Glass Victus 2, and also the hinge comes with armor aluminum of good resistance. However, it is not completely free of gaps. There is a small gap in this part at the time of having folded the device, which can cause a little more dust to enter the account, but well, it is something that I think is difficult to eliminate 100% in folding. But in this case, talking about the hinge, I honestly think we are in front of the best in the industry because it is a rigid hinge. You don't feel that the device is dancing when you shake it a little bit. Notice that even at fairly tight angles, the device still stays on well. Obviously, if I make a very sharp movement, yes, I'm going to get it to close, but I've tried other devices with a much looser and looser hinge. In this case, it has a good level of rigidity, and as you know, it has flex mode, so it can stay in a semi-folded mode at any angle, and it does it with a very good quality. And by the way, it supports IP48 as a water resistance level, and we could say dust, but I've already explained to you that it's actually a little bit larger particles that we wouldn't consider dust, but at least it's a higher level than the IPX8 that we saw last generation. So there's a little bit of evolution there in the resistance, and obviously there's a little bit of evolution also in terms of the lightness or the dimensions that we could have in this device. If it reaches a weight of 187 grams and when it's unfolded it's 6.9 millimeters thick. It is quite thin in this sense, although obviously when you fold it up it is a bit thicker, reaching 14.9 millimeters. But honestly it's something that's not bothersome as the device ends up being much more compact in shape, so it's easy to store in pockets. One of the advantages of all foldables in this form factor, and something that we don't usually consider much when doing a review, is the ability to buy original accessories for it, and obviously Samsung offers a good variety, unlike other brands that may not offer you as many accessories to complement your purchase. Also remember that this device has a wide variety of colors available. In this case I have the blue edition, but it is also available in mint color, silver shade, and online there are some exclusive colors called Artisan Black and White. So we have a good variety in the color palette for you to choose the one you like the most. Let's talk about the external display. In this case, I have to tell you that the screen is barely fair. Let's just say that they only put it there to comply with putting an external display, but it really isn't that much of a quality screen. It does have Super AMOLED technology, but remember that Samsung has Dynamic AMOLED 2X technology, which is newer. So in this case, it's not going to offer us Samsung's latest technology for the external display. We find a size of 3.4 inches in its diagonal. Although remember that having a folder design, there is a small area that is eliminated, then it has a small cut that honestly does not feel bad. In size, I wouldn't worry too much about this screen. I think it has enough size to show you enough content. But what I can complain about the screen is its resolution, for example, which is 720 by 748 pixels. It reaches a pixel density of 305 pixels per inch. That is, it is a screen that falls below what one would expect from such an expensive device. Generally, we could demand more than 400 pixels per inch to see sharper text, and I understood it in past generations because I thought that as the generations progressed, this screen was going to improve, but honestly, there is no improvement. So I hope that the next generation Samsung really puts a good quality screen in this external area, because it's actually a 60 Hz screen. So the animations and the movements that it's going to show are not going to look as smooth. One is used today to see screens of at least 90 Hz with smoother movements. So when you use this device with the external display, it does give you the feeling that it is a slightly slower device, and not because it doesn't have power, but because the display doesn't show these smoother movements. So it is not as such a bad screen. But for the price at which this device is distributed, we expected a much more advanced screen. And the internal display, on the other hand, is much better. We find a 6.7-inch panel, again an AMOLED panel, but now it is Dynamic AMOLED 2X. The resolution is Full HD+, so its density remains at 425 pixels per inch, displaying crisp texts. In this case, it is even able to vary its refresh rate from 1 to 120 Hz. So it can show you very fluid movements, or it can save battery life when it's displaying static content. That's exactly what we would ask of it for the external display, where you haven't placed it, but at least on the internal display it does deliver with good quality. Now on this screen supports HDR content, and when it's displaying, it has a peak brightness of 2600 nits. So brightness is not something to worry about, although it is true that this ultra-thin glass that it has in conjunction with the additional mica are not able to avoid much reflections. So if you're in a very brightly lit environment behind, you may get to have some hindrances in your vision. It's something that hopefully with the passage of the next generations can get better and better, but being a foldable display, I can't complain too much about reflections. But still, the maximum brightness will serve you well to comfortably use the device outdoors, and also has a very low minimum brightness, and also the option of extra dimming in the accessibility options, so you can use the device very comfortably indoors or at night. Nights. This display has two color calibration modes, one that is natural and one that offers vivid colors, although interestingly in this case there is no color vibrancy adjustment, as we do see on the Galaxy S24 Ultra. Within the natural mode, you can also adjust the white balance manually, or you could set the automatic white balance with a feature called Adaptive Color Tone, which from my point of view should be named as Automatic White Balance, and that's it, because what it will do is adjust the white of the screen with the white of the environment. So if you're in a warm light environment, the screen gets a little bit warmer, and the same thing happens with a cold light environment. That's something I've been asking Samsung for years, and we're finally starting to see it built into their devices. It also has an option called Video Brightness that will allow you to raise the brightness of the screen when viewing videos within some specific applications. The sound of this device will be of very good quality. It is stereo sound with a speaker on the bottom and another speaker in the earpiece area for calls. It is not completely symmetrical, but it does give us good power. In this sense, I could not complain because it is a sound that is meeting the expectation of this price. Although it does not have an exaggeratedly high volume, but it is enough for you to enjoy your music, and in conjunction with the software you also get good tools. It has Dolby Atmos. It has a 9-band equalizer available, so you can customize the sound without the need to have headphones connected. And it includes two new options to this generation, such as optimizing the dialogues that when you are watching a movie, for example, could help you to better understand the dialogues by removing some noises. And it also brings volume normalization, which can also be very useful in movies where the sound is very designed to be seen in the theater. And when you are watching it on a mobile device, it can be annoying that sometimes the volume is too low and other times the volume goes too high. So this device can intelligently control it. It also brings adapt sound, so you can do a little test of how you listen based on your age. So you can adjust the sound intelligently, and also brings independent application sounds, so when you have your device connected to a Bluetooth speaker, you can send the sound of certain applications to the speaker and keep the sound of other applications on your cell phone. As I had already anticipated, it does not have a headphone jack, but as for the wireless connection of your headphones, you will be able to enjoy good quality as it supports aptX and LDAC as high-resolution codecs, in addition to Samsung's own SSC codec that can be enjoyed with the Galaxy Buds. So yes, you can have a good range of options for high-resolution audio, although it doesn't support all the advanced codecs as we do see on other high-end devices. There are also 4 microphones built into this device and they are going to offer us good quality for capturing voices. Let's have a test below.
Esta es una prueba de la grabación de sonido utilizando los micrófonos integrados del Galaxy Z Flip 6.
Obviously, some of these microphones will be used for noise reduction during calls, so capturing your voice is very good. Next, we will see a video recorded in a very noisy environment to see how these microphones behave there.
Don't call me, I don't wanna talk to you. I'm better off not talking to you. But why are you trying to hold on?
They are definitely capable of regulating their gain so that even in very noisy environments, the audio is not saturated and still maintains good clarity. So for recording concerts, it is recommended. The front camera is only 10 megapixels with f2.2 aperture and fixed focus. The truth is that it will be a pretty simple camera, and honestly it has a clear explanation. You can take pictures with selfie mode using the main camera system, but anyway, being such an expensive device, obviously we should demand a higher quality camera in here. As you saw, it has the 2-tap gesture on the power button to quickly open the camera. You can do that same gesture to rotate and it gives you a wide angle and a close angle. In fact, the photos are 6 megapixels, so it has very little detail. Fortunately, it is a device that has good agility and also supports the palm gesture for easier capture. In fact, it also supports voice commands to capture the photo, or you can enable the floating button to place it where you find it more comfortable. When using the external display, you can use the volume buttons to trigger the photo, or there is also the gesture support. You could also tap the screen and note that it does have very good agility in this case, although if we hold down the screen, we don't have a burst. Whereas with the device unfolded, we can slide down the shutter and note that we have a burst, and if we hold down, we can start recording a video. Also notice that a button appears in the upper right corner to have some color filters depending on your tastes, even with an intensity setting. We also have facial beauty modifications that are turned off by default, but we can turn them on with 4 different parameters. And finally, we can also select the color tone of the photo for color rendition if we want it to be natural or warm. On the external display, it does not offer us so many customization settings, but we can access the natural color or warm color, as well as adjust the size of our photograph if we wanted to take advantage of the entire sensor, or we want it to come out as a vertical photograph, as a square photograph, or as a photograph that uses the entire width of the screen. And obviously, being a foldable, you can take advantage of this flex mode to take selfies leaving the device on a table, both in this part with the front camera and with the external screen if you simply open the camera and then slightly unfold the device to leave it this way. In fact, when you use it this way, it also has a button for an automatic framing with zoom, although I do not consider it so useful, but there it is present. This front camera gives us an acceptable photo quality, but being a folding, the most advisable will be to take selfies with the rear system. It's not a bad picture, but honestly, it doesn't look that advanced in terms of level of detail. It offers us 2 levels of width, and the more closed level will have even less resolution, so it will have very little level of detail, as you can confirm. However, at the widest level, the pictures are 10 megapixels, and as I say, it has enough breadth to have a simple group picture, but look at what you could achieve with the external ultra-wide camera, and this is still in a square ratio. If you use the 3:4 ratio, you're going to have an even wider photograph, so as I say, the best thing to do is to use the external photo system. Another example is that the front camera comes with fixed focus, so you would not be able to focus on something close to your face, unlike what you could achieve with the external photo system. In fact, the external photo system allows you to zoom into selfie mode, so you would be able to get super detailed pictures of your face. So, having confirmed this, look at the quality of selfies we would get with the external system with the ultra-wide camera. It is very good with good color, good contrast, and above all, very good amplitude. Indoors, he notes that the front camera comes with a good enough quality, controls noise well, although the colors seem not to be as saturated as we would like. Instead, observe the result that the main camera would give us in this selfie mode. It definitely has much more detail, still handles noise well, and the color is also more intense. In backlit scenes, the preview does not look optimized even with the front camera, and this would be the result. It seems to me that it does manage to do a very good balance of highlights and shadows, but again, the level of detail falls quite short. It looks like a too simple photograph. If you use the external screen to take this picture, the preview looks more optimized, and notice that the result is also acceptable, although the highlights area still looks a bit overexposed, and you have to be careful with your finger when holding the camera because otherwise you might mess up the picture a bit. But notice how with the ultra-wide camera we have a pretty good result in terms of backlighting. The highlight area is perfectly well exposed, the shadow area as well, and we find a very good level of detail. In the evenings, it will be exactly the same. Look at the picture with the selfie mode. We have a low level of detail and in fact a little more presence of noise and grain in the darker areas. In nighttime backlit scenes, it does a good job in the darker area, lighting up nicely, although the brighter area does get overexposed. But now look at the results we could have with the main photographic system using the external display. We definitely have much more detail, noise and graininess in the darker areas are better controlled, and color is well maintained. Even with the ultra-wide camera at night, the result is still acceptable, although it is true that the noise and graininess is intensified in a very important way. So the best thing to do at night is to take selfies with the main camera. This would be the result with the portrait mode of the front camera. Notice that it looks very simple. There is little detail and overexposed areas. And with the main camera, it improves especially in the level of detail, although it still overexposes too much the most illuminated area. However, it is more advisable to take pictures with this camera. It is clear that it is a camera that could still improve, and here is the portrait mode with the front camera. It seems to me that it does a good job keeping even objects in focus, although there are some areas where it doesn't quite have all the precision we would like. And if you take the portrait with the rear system, I think it does a positive job. In fact, it improves the detection a lot more because this trunk was a little bit behind me, so it comes out slightly out of focus, and the further away you get, the more out of focus it gets. So the portrait shots are good, but again, the recommended thing to do is to do it with the rear system. For the rear photographic system, we will find the main camera of 23mm with 50 megapixels in its sensor. In addition, it has f1.8 aperture, autofocus, and optical stabilization. On the other hand, there is the ultra-wide camera of 13mm with 12 megapixels on the sensor, f2.2 aperture, and fixed focus. The truth is that it is a photographic system too simple for what we are paying. At the very least, we would ask for the ultra-wide camera to have autofocus so that it would also allow us to take higher quality macro shots. At least this generation has already increased the resolution of the main sensor, which should improve the zoom that we will test in a moment, since it offers us a cutout inside the sensor to give us the perspective of a 47mm lens. That is, as if it had an additional telephoto camera with 12 megapixels. This camera, as you can see, also has a fairly agile response. It offers us a burst of up to 100 photographs, and it does allow us to capture practically the exact moment. In this case, we tried to capture number 3, and we even captured it slightly before number 3. So, it's very responsive, and the burst takes a little over a quarter of a second to start, but after that, as you can see, the space between one photograph and the next is really too short for you to extract the exact moment. Again, in the top right corner, we will find a button to activate some color filters with an intensity setting, and also the facial beauty options while keeping the 4 front camera settings. By tapping on the screen, you can adjust the exposure and also the focus. Or you can also access the professional mode where more parameters are available. For example, the ISO can go up to 3200, the shutter speed can go up to 30 seconds. You also have the compensation setting, the focus, the white balance, and at the top there are even more settings where we can calibrate the contrast, highlights, shadows, saturation, and tint. So it's remarkably advanced photography, but in the settings you could also enable the option for these photographs within Pro mode to be saved in RAW or combine JPG with RAW format. Although if you want even more advanced photographs, it is recommended that you download Expert RAW, with which you could have photographs of 24 megapixels to have an intermediate setting between 50 and 12. In addition, within Expert RAW, we also have some light filter simulators. You also have the ability to take pictures with the astrophoto mode or an astronomical portrait. In short, you have much more advanced functions also to merge two photographs and more. In addition, it also includes the intelligent document scanner. Although it is simple, note that it will only crop the image, but it is not able to optimize the colors. It allows us to add it to a note, but it will not allow us to add pages. It also allows us to extract the text in digital format, but unlike other brands that have been improving their scanner function, in this case it is perceived as a simple scanner. Although note how it is able to clean up the scan. In this case, it removed the finger that was visible on top of it. Finally, QR codes can also be scanned quite easily. And with respect to the foldable software, obviously the interface is going to adapt when you have the flex mode, and you also have the ability to transfer the viewing area to the lower half of the screen, which can be useful for taking pictures of things that are above. Likewise, we're going to be able to enable the preview on the external display so you can have a second look from the outside. So it has good options, and the software is perfectly well adapted for this foldable form factor. This device does allow us to use the high resolution mode to get extremely detailed pictures. Look at the quality this device offers, so you can crop a picture and still maintain an excellent level of detail. Although we do see a bit of over-sharpening in some elements, which gives a bit of a weird feeling in the final result. But the truth is that it is a photograph with a good level of detail. Notice, for example, this mesh, how it is perfectly well appreciated. And in fact, the device through the Expert RAW application also allows you to take 24 megapixel photos, which also gives us a very good level of detail. Notice that these are pictures that you can really appreciate with a lot of sharpness. And in fact, using Expert RAW, it looks like the sharpness is not as exaggerated as in the high resolution mode. But either way, you're seeing the results. Obviously, this photograph is still in RAW, so it would lack a bit of additional processing for the expert photographers. But also here I took that same photograph in JPG, just so you can see more or less the difference, because here it is already developed with a good color rendition. In motion pictures, notice how it is able to keep people or objects that are moving static, both with the main camera and with the ultra-wide camera. And in this scenario, which is outdoors with a little bit of backlighting, we see that the ultra-wide camera has performed average, I would say, because you notice that some areas have quite a bit of noise. There's also a little bit of distortion on the edges. It is not a really premium camera. It is a camera that remains fair, especially little evolution compared to the last generation. Note that in some areas will even appear a little chromatic aberration. Although fortunately it seems to be a little better controlled than other devices, the main camera is going to have a similar performance. Color rendering fortunately remains similar between both cameras. In this case, it was an overcast day, so that's why we have a slightly cooler tonality, unlike other tests we've done. But overall, it is a camera that did perform well enough, although not an expert photographer. Indoors, I really like the performance it has both with the ultra-wide camera and with the main camera, as it notes that in both cases we appreciate a fairly clean result, although if you get very close you are going to notice a little more grainy, especially in the ultra-wide camera, but I like that it gets to keep good color saturation. Obviously with the main camera we are going to find a much cleaner picture in terms of noise management, but the color is very similar in both cases. See, in backlit scenes, this device has a more optimized preview than most Android devices, and look at the result with the ultra-wide camera. We see a good balance of highlights and shadows. Even we do not see too much chromatic aberration revealed where there are some light gaps. Only on the edge is where we see a little more chromatic aberration and especially greater presence of noise in this particular photograph. So I insist that the camera does not seem to be so spectacular. With the main camera, we also see a good balance of light and shadow in this type of complicated backlit photographs, so in these tests, it has behaved well. At night, again the ultra-wide camera, you are going to notice that it has a bit excessive and exaggerated noise. Note the amount of graininess that appears in these areas, so it seems that Samsung needs to improve and optimize this type of photographs. The most illuminated area, we also see that it is overexposed and the colors are barely accurate. The main camera is much improved in several aspects. For example, it controls noise and graininess better, although it is still noticeably visible in the darker areas, but it also saturates colors better and exposes the brighter areas in a better way. Now watch this test I did in much darker conditions. The preview looks sufficiently better lit than the reality was, and the result also surprised me because, believe me, it was a pretty dark scene, but the device automatically activates the night mode and the result can become very good in terms of illumination. Obviously, it will not have such a high level of detail, but I remind you that it was a very dark light condition. The ultra-wide camera comes out with less light, but it also manages to recover the lighting well, and obviously using the flash, you're going to have a much more aggressive lighting fill. So it's a device that can do well in very dark scenarios. Now let's look at the zoom range that this device achieves. In this case, we are with the main camera, then we move on to the 2x zoom photography, where the device promises to maintain a good quality, and it seems that it does. In this case, remember that it is a device that does not integrate a specialized zoom camera, but this time they have integrated a high-resolution camera on the main sensor, so by applying a crop, it can still maintain good quality in this setting. Now you're looking at the 4x zoom, where in my view, it still maintains excellent quality. Samsung has upgraded its image engine, and in this generation, it doesn't seem to go as far as giving a super sharpness to several of the elements in the picture, so they still look very natural, maintaining good quality in the zoomed-in pictures. And this is the maximum that comes, which is 10x. And again, the processing that it does seems to me to be very successful because it does not over-exaggerate some details of the photograph. So it is noticeable that it is digital zoom, but it is of very good quality. In this sense, there will be a complete evolution with respect to the last generation. Even in areas where there are no letters, it seems to me that the zoom comes to score with a good quality, although it is still not his specialty, but it is much improved over the last generation. For macro photography, note that you can't get too close to these tiny objects, but if you apply a bit of digital zoom with 2x, you can get a slightly more attractive picture, at least if you get to appreciate the details and keep the color well. In fact, with 4x zoom, you could have an even more attractive photograph while still maintaining a good level of detail. It's not an expert at macro photography, but you can take good pictures. But where it is an expert is in panoramic photography, as it allows you to use the ultra-wide camera, having extremely wide shots, combining ultra-wide lens with panoramic mode. In addition, it offers us a high-resolution panoramic photography, which does have a good level of detail and with a good dynamic range, so even areas of lights and shadows come out well balanced. Curiously, panoramic photography with the main camera has had a lower dynamic range, having several overexposed areas of the most illuminated parts, so it is best to take panoramic pictures with the ultra-wide camera. Finally, let's look at portrait photography. This is an extremely complicated environment because of the distance we have, and notice that he has blurred the gaps between the arm and the gaps between different branches of this tree in the right way. And the funny thing is that it already allows us to take portrait pictures with a telephoto perspective by applying 2x zoom, something that the last generation didn't allow. So you can have portraits of a little more quality compared to the last generation, but it seems to me that still the bokeh effect generated is quite simple, especially compared to the work that other manufacturers are doing lately with their portrait mode. But notice how it's even capable of taking portrait shots of such objects without a person present. And with the zoom setting, the result also looks more attractive and professional. Here is another similar example, and finally 2 other examples where I am present, and again the result is good in terms of foreground and background detection. And thanks to the telephoto perspective, the result can look a bit more professional. In this case, a slightly nicer bokeh effect is generated in the background. It's all going to depend on the lighting you have in the back, but portraits are also improved over the last generation. For video recording, it's positive that it goes up to 4K at 60 frames per second, not only with the main camera, but also with the ultra-wide camera. So you do have good capabilities with both cameras. In fact, also the front camera is capable of recording at this resolution setting, which comes in very handy. When recording video, notice that we will find the button to take pictures or snapshots while we are recording, also the button to pause and resume recording, and another button to switch to the front camera without stopping the video recording, something that can be very useful to be inside this same video. We can also turn on the flashlight, although curiously this button disappears or is disabled when you activate the ultra-wide camera, something that is common in Galaxy devices. But it seems to me that it does give us good settings, and even if we switch to a flex mode, note that we don't need to stop recording for all this to adapt. It also has the button to change the viewing area, although if you want to enjoy another special feature, you do have to stop your recording, and if you start recording in this format, notice that a different setting for the zoom will appear, so that when you record in this handycam format, you have a little more comfortable control. Even notice how the rec button appears, although for the zoom presets it seems that they will only appear on this half of the screen, so there is still room for improvement. It also has an automatic framing function that can be very useful if you are in this mode, so that in case you have left your cell phone recording, watch how it will automatically frame you even if you are moving in the same scene. And in this case, we will also find the professional video setting, where we find a lot of manual parameters to manipulate, including a microphone setting where you can select whether you want it to pick up omnidirectional sound, front, rear, or from a USB-C source in case you connect a microphone, or also from your own Bluetooth headphones, or doing a mix. So these are settings that generally other manufacturers don't offer, and it's still an advantage of the Galaxy. And by the way, from the external display, you can also record video, because remember, it has portrait mode and video mode available, so no problem there. You can also manipulate the zoom, and in fact, while you're recording, you can also move the zoom, so it has good settings. It's also going to allow us to change some other things like resolution and enable auto framing directly from this external screen. Here is a video recording result with 60 frames per second using the ultra-wide camera. I remind you that if you are in this recording mode, it doesn't allow you to switch between the different cameras, so you have to stop recording and start it again if you want to switch to main lens at 60 frames per second. The result definitely looks very nice in this setting. It all depends on your taste as well, but obviously the fact that it has these capabilities is a good thing. Below is an example with 30 frames per second, just so you can notice that it handles color well, handles exposure well, and obviously in this setting it allows us to switch to the main camera. The result in video recording seems to me to be positive. Samsung has positioned itself lately as a good alternative in terms of video recording. Indoors, you can see that the ultra-wide camera can suffer a little more than necessary, especially when trying to reduce the noise that can be generated. But it maintains good color saturation, although the level of detail may fall a little short. Obviously, in low-light scenarios, it is more advisable to record with the main camera that regulates noise better and also maintains good color saturation and, above all, a very good level of detail. In backlit scenarios, I first did a test with the ultra-wide camera, and everything depends also on the distance from which you are recording. If you are a little far away, it makes a better balance. If you get a little closer, it will give more priority to illuminate your face, but still it doesn't sacrifice so much the most illuminated area. Changing the main camera, the behavior is exactly the same. I must say that in this case it was a very aggressive backlit area because it was a cloudy day, and still the device does a good job. Maybe the shadow area stays a little darker than it should, but I insist that it was a cloudy day, so there was not much light to illuminate the face. But at night, the ultra-wide camera definitely suffers a bit too much. It is immediately noticeable that it is not a camera of such quality by the presence of noise and even the distortion in the colors that can be witnessed. With the main camera, we will notice a better noise management, but even so, I would not consider it a specialist in this type of video recording, as it fails to balance lights and shadows well in these dark conditions. Although, fortunately, it does maintain the warm color that it was in reality, so you simply need to be in a well-lit environment. As for stabilization, the device does do a very good job. Notice that with the ultra-wide camera, both walking and running, it does a good job and a good balance on all movements. Switching to the main camera, we will notice exactly the same. Although obviously here you can get to notice a little more compensation movements when running, but still gives a remarkably attractive result. You could also use the super stable mode, although this lowers the video resolution and obviously the result will be very good. This is ideal for scenarios where you are running with a lot more speed and you need the device to balance all these movements better. So both with and without the super stable mode, the device does a good job. But it also integrates a portrait video recording mode, although it honestly looks pretty fake in edge detection. It seems to me that in this case Samsung has taken a step backwards because in other generations we have seen better behavior. Fortunately, it does reduce the intensity of the blur if I move away, and it also maintains the effect even if it doesn't detect my face. But the detection is not very good, and it is also in Full HD, when in other Samsung devices we have seen support for recording such videos in 4K. Fortunately, it does keep in focus the objects that are in the foreground, but I insist that the edge detection can look a little fake and artificial, unlike other Galaxy. It also allows us to apply a little zoom for this type of recordings, but immediately you notice that digital zoom has little detail and has exactly the same behavior. The edges do not get to detect them with good accuracy. It also integrates a fast camera mode from 4x that can be good for recording people or walking movements, also with good stabilization and in 4K. Or it can go up to 60x, which honestly falls short for recording spectacular landscapes, especially once we know that other devices can go up to 1800x or more. So the fast camera on this device is simple. The slow motion can be in full HD at 240 frames per second. Again, there are other Galaxy devices that have greater capabilities, and it's not understandable why Samsung doesn't enable those same capabilities on this device, being just as expensive. So there are several aspects that confirm to us that Samsung is actually not granting us the best of cameras in this foldable device. Still, the slow motion effect can look nice, and later I will tell you how you can create slow motion videos with artificial intelligence as well. As for the focus management, it also does a good job. It's a soft focus, it doesn't react that fast, but that allows it to be quite stable because even in a little bit more subtle and smooth movements, the focus is going to adapt correctly. So that's something that I consider positive in this cell phone. Finally, regarding the zoom, note that it does switch between ultra-wide camera and main camera. The movement can be smooth and the level of detail falls a little short at the maximum level, which is 10x. In photography, we saw a little more optimization, but in video, I think it does come to have a level of detail a little low, especially compared to traditional devices. Now watch the result with the front camera at 60 frames per second. It makes for very smooth motion if you like, although most will record at 30 frames per second. Notice that the backlit performance is average. There are some areas that get to overexpose too much, and even making the switch to 30 frames per second, it still has this same backlit performance. So it is not an expert in this sense, but the stabilization is very good and it also offers a good level of detail. So recording with the front camera seems positive to me, but obviously having the rear camera available through the external display, it will be preferable to use it because, for example, we will have fixed focus on this front camera. So if you record with the rear system and the external screen, notice how the result goes up a level completely. There is a totally natural background blur effect. The backlight behavior is much better. There are no overexposed areas. And notice how you can also switch to the ultra-wide camera to have a wider environment with the same backlight behavior. So for recording vlogs, it is much more advisable to use the external camera system with the external display. With the main camera, remember that you would also have autofocus enabled to show something to the audience. So it's up to you whether you want to use the main camera or the ultra-wide camera. In fact, it even allows us to zoom in while we're recording video. So some people could show details of their face if they wanted to. And obviously you can also record at 60 frames per second using the rear system, although in that case it doesn't let you switch between the ultra-wide camera and the main camera until you stop recording. Now you're looking at the result of the front camera indoors, where it definitely looks plain. It doesn't seem to be that advanced a camera. Notice how the movements don't look that sharp and there's low level of detail. This will improve if you record with the rear system, although in this case I recorded at 60 frames per second. The most advisable would be to record at 30 frames per second in environments that do not have so much illumination. And with the ultra-wide camera, in these types of scenarios, you're also going to notice that it can suffer just like the front camera, but it's much wider. At night, the front camera is going to confirm that it is not a very advanced camera. In fact, observe how the colors look a little strange. The level of detail is also low in order to try to reduce noise. And in scenarios, a little more complicated lighting, even with movement, notice how there is low definition. So it's a very simple camera in these respects. In fact, if we go to darker areas, we will notice that the device struggles too much to define the details well and does not allow us to use a flash simulation on the screen. So the best thing to do is to record with the main camera using the external screen. Observe how the result improves completely. It is much better. Even when walking, you will see the movements better defined, although it also tries to reduce the noise a little, but it is nothing that eliminates too much detail. And in darker areas still does not allow us to turn on the flashlight, so we do not like in that aspect, but fortunately maintains good detail unless you switch to the ultra-wide camera, where you can get to suffer as well as in the front camera to illuminate in a good way. On the front camera, we'll also find the fast camera mode with the same settings we saw on the rear camera. And we will also find a slow motion mode, simple, but you could get to use in certain scenarios. Although you could also record slow motion with the rear camera in case you want a slightly more detailed result, and the front camera also incorporates a portrait recording mode blurring the background, which interestingly performs better than what we saw with the rear camera. Notice that the edges don't look as artificial as they did with the rear camera, and it also manages to keep objects in focus. So I would prefer shooting with portrait mode using the front camera and not the rear camera, oddly enough. I mention this because I usually tell you that it's better to use the external system, but specifically for portrait mode, the front camera is better. In fact, you can also change the intensity of the blur or change the effects as well. Honestly, there is an effect that looks exaggeratedly artificial with very intense blur, so it would not be so advisable to use it, but it also has a black and white style and another glitch style to get creative. Finally, it also supports dual recording mode, showing both the rear camera and the front camera, although in this case it does not allow us to switch between the ultra-wide camera and the main camera. That is, it has the zoom completely blocked. What it does allow us is to move the small picture-in-picture mode box, which by the way has rounded corners, and that gives it a more premium touch, but the fact of not allowing us to zoom definitely limits us quite a bit. Since you could only switch to the main camera to be a little closer compared to the ultra-wide camera, and fortunately it keeps the focus enabled, but I insist the zoom is totally locked, so it takes away a lot of versatility when you're making these recordings. It does allow you to rotate so that the front camera becomes the protagonist and the rear camera becomes the secondary camera without stopping the video recording. And finally, you can also have the split screen mode to have both cameras in the same size. And in fact, also the device has a mode to record the clips separately. So you would have 3 clips in total, 1 merged clip and the 2 separate ones, if you want to work it better in post-production. This device comes with Android 14 and One UI 6.1 from Samsung. In both cases, we see the latest from the manufacturers, and they are also going to offer us 7 years of software updates. This is one point where Samsung is still ahead of the curve. It is a device that is going to give you a very good lifetime and will obviously include several functions that we are already used to in Samsung, such as edge panels, where we have quick access to applications, people, even other trimming tools and more. But the curious thing is that in this generation no longer appears the option to download more edge panels through the Galaxy Store. I personally didn't use it, but if you do, you're going to miss it. There is also an edge lighting option that will allow notifications to illuminate the outline of your screen, although this is only for the internal screen. You can customize the animation, duration, thickness, color, and more. In fact, you could also change the color of this animation based on keywords you receive through notifications. Another very common Samsung advantage is the floating windows, so you can open as many apps as you want in this mode. Through the Lab section, you can force all apps to work this way. And also through Good Lock, you can modify their behavior so that, for example, 2 applications are playing at the same time without one opaque to the other. Obviously, you also have split screen available, and you have a whole customization center with different themes. Most of them are paid, and you can also access there to some always-on display covers in case you have the device deployed. It's funny though, because these always-on display skins are only going to work with the screen unfolded, which is rare, so there's still not too much customization for always-on display for the external display. In fact, always-on display only works inside and not on the external screen. Samsung also offers widgets on the lock screen so you can have quick access to some tools, and evidently it supports Bixby as its voice assistant by holding down the power button. Bixby, I've already told you, is very good at controlling the device. It's not very good at requesting information. It's generally going to ask Google, and the experience there is not going to be as advanced. But controlling your device is going to be very good, and it can even control smart things. So you could also turn on your house light or similar things just by holding down the button. In fact, if you have the keyboard open, you can also hold down the button to dictate the message with a lot of speed. It also includes a number of slightly more traditional motions and gestures, such as double tapping the screen and the like. And the one-handed mode I like because it adjusts the screen both vertically and horizontally for a much more comfortable experience. In fact, you can resize this little screen and change the position to have a perfect fit. It also includes effects for video calls, supported in WhatsApp, Google Meet, and maybe other apps. So while you are on a video call, you can blur the background, for example, similar to what we see in some video call apps. But in this case, you don't depend on the app, but Samsung gives you this tool. You can also have a solid background fill, activate some other additional light options, and similar things. It also includes the whole modes and routines section that Samsung has popularized and is one of the favorite features of all Galaxy users because they can automate a lot of things on their device. So, there are causes and consequences. In the list of causes, there are many things. In the list of consequences, there would also be a whole video explaining the modes and routines section, but in short, it allows you to automate everything you want from your cell phone. Samsung even lets you customize the screenshots, so you can choose in which folder they will be saved, in what format they will be saved, and also the screen recordings you can customize if you want to show the front camera, in what resolution you want to go, so it is very customizable, this system. And within the gallery, you can also extract images by holding down on them, something that we are already used to in more and more systems. The same happens with the text, and even if you pause a video, you can also extract text in this simple way. And it also brings a GIF generator and also a collage generator or even a small video editor, which honestly is not very advanced, but it's all available in this system. And finally, remember that you also have access to Samsung Members, an application where you can not only report a problem or chat with other Galaxy users, but you can also have access to different discount coupons that you can take advantage of thanks to the alliances that Samsung has with restaurants, clothing stores, travel stores, and much more. Let's quickly talk now about artificial intelligence, which is one of the protagonists in this new device. For example, we will find the call assistant, which now works not only in the native calling app, but also in video calling apps like WhatsApp, Google Meet, Telegram, Instagram, and possibly others. Remember that through this feature, you can have a real-time translator. So you can see on screen the transcript of what the other person is saying, or even your cell phone can pronounce in your own language whatever the other person is saying in another language. The experience is not as fast, but the same thing happens from your side. You can speak in your own language and the other person hears you in another language. However, as I say, it is not such a fast experience. Although here the interesting and most curious thing is that this function does not require an internet connection. That is, all the processing is done directly on the phone. So for example, you could have a full translation of the entire WhatsApp chat, Instagram, or your own system messaging app. You can translate your entire chat screen. You can say whether or not you want the original message to be displayed plus the translation, and obviously through the keyboard you can also translate whatever it is that you want to type. The keyboard also has a tool called Redactor where you can write a simple text and the device can transform it into something much more complex. It includes a standard mode, email, network, comment, and also has different styles like informal, professional, or respectful. So with all these combinations, you can generate a completely different modified text, although this does require an internet connection. However, there is also another very similar function that changes the style of your writing. So whatever you have written can also be transformed into another style, and that function does not require an internet connection. All this directly from the keyboard. Obviously, it can also check your spelling, and not only that, but also your grammar. It also works without internet connection, so if you make a mistake, it can correct it, but you must select that you want a revision. Within the chat support, there is also a feature called Suggested Answers. This works if you have a Galaxy Watch 6 or Galaxy Watch Ultra. Since in conjunction with your cell phone, when you receive a message on WhatsApp or any other app, the watch will tell you that it's generating suggested replies, even though it's actually the cell phone that's generating them. So this is only compatible with Galaxy Z Flip 6 and Galaxy Z Fold 6, at least that for now. So on the watch, it's going to show you some suggestions. At times, it gives you good suggestions. At other times, it doesn't. There are times where all the suggestions it gives you are affirmative, for example, and you don't even get a negative suggestion. So I think that could be improved a little bit more. But where I found the behavior even worse is on the external display, because this feature Samsung advertises as a very interesting new feature. But the reality of things is that in order for it to work, for example, in WhatsApp, you have to disable WhatsApp as an app for the external display. So the only way to respond is through these smart replies, which is unusual because most people are going to want to enable WhatsApp so that you can use them on this external screen. So it ends up being a useless feature. There is another application included called Interpreter, which will allow you to translate in both ways and not only translate between two languages, but it can also display the transcript, taking advantage of the external screen. And you're probably wondering, this is something we've already seen for years, a simple translator. But in this case, the novelty is that you don't need an internet connection. Everything is processed within your device, and that even allows you to save data when you go on a trip. So it is a feature that can be interesting.
Hola, estoy probando mi nuevo teléfono.
Hello, I'm testing my new phone.
Oh, what a wonderful phone!
¿Qué teléfono tan maravilloso?
De verdad es increíble que funcione sin internet.
Really, it's amazing that it works without the internet.
Yeah, bro, that's amazing.
Sí, hermano, eso es increíble.
It also includes the Note Wizard, which in Samsung Notes can format your notes in a completely different way. Although this does require an internet connection, it can also summarize a very long note, although it does have a character limit and also requires an internet connection. Although you can choose between two styles of summary, a detailed one and a standard one. So these are functions that are attractive and useful anyway, but they require internet connection. Also within the notes, it can correct your spelling, and curiously, that function requires internet connection, which seems very strange to me. It can translate your notes, transcribe audios, and summarize audio recordings you have made. These last three options I mentioned do not require an internet connection, and to give you an idea, a recording of about 13 minutes can be transcribed and summarized in 2 minutes. I repeat that all this is processed directly on the cell phone without going to the cloud. You could also summarize and translate PDF documents if you import them into Samsung Notes, so it can be a useful tool for studying as well. It also has the transcription assistant within the voice recorder, which has exactly the same behavior that we saw in Samsung Notes, but as a standalone application within the web browser. Can also translate pages, which does not require an internet connection. And within the photo assistant, there are many more options, all of which require an internet connection. We found generative editing, so you could remove some object or move it to a different position or even change the size, and the gaps will be filled through generative artificial intelligence. Most of the time we have a good result. There are other times where the result looks a little strange, but in general it is a function that can be useful. There is also the Portrait Studio, where we can select a different style to generate an image based on your photograph. There is a cartoon style, a sketch style, and many other styles, so you can gain some very good possibilities. All of this is completely free, at least for the moment. There is also a feature called Instant Slow-Mo, which will allow you, when you are viewing a video in the gallery, you can hold down on the screen and that fragment will turn it into a slow motion, even if the video was not originally recorded in slow motion. And believe me, the result is very good, so it's another way to generate slow motion content even if you didn't record it thinking about it. Although that was already possible before, but the novelty is that now a small button will appear to save this video more easily. It also has a drawing assistant, although it does not support an S Pen, but if you have enough creativity with your finger, you can generate and transform these drawings into a little more professional styles. This works both in Samsung Notes and in your photo editor for you to add some element to the picture. For example, I added a ladder and it worked well. It also has a function to generate wallpapers, although you do not directly type a prompt, but simply choose from different categories and the device will generate this background with internet connection. Or you also have an option called Ambient Screen, which can transform your lock screen background to go according to the time. For example, to make it transform at night, or if it's raining, it will add rain to that background. So it can be an interesting way, but it only works on the lock screen. It also includes the Health Assistant in conjunction with Samsung Health, but you need the most recent generation of their watches. And something interesting is that it does have a switch so that you as a user can easily select whether or not you want your content and all this artificial intelligence to be sent to the cloud, or if you prefer everything to be processed directly on the cell phone. Obviously, if any function requires internet connection, you will be asked to disable this option. And finally, it also includes Circle to Search in collaboration with Google, so you can simply select something from your screen having held down the home button and you can do a direct Google search. It can be useful for finding items you saw on a profile or page but don't know how to search for. Or it can also be useful to extract text directly from any area of the system, or even more attractive to translate the entire screen, which can be very useful if you are trying to use an application that is in another language. Let's talk now about the foldable features that this device has. Starting with the external display that you can customize in a very good way. You can have different covers already created similar to what we see in watches, so you can change it very easily from this external screen. There are different categories from which you can create all these wallpapers. Some simply allow you to fill with your own image, others already come animated with Samsung's own designs, but there is a very good variety. By default, this external screen will not allow us to use applications, but only widgets that are actually very well designed. For example, there is the Spotify widget, and not only are they full screen widgets, but you can have a grid of different widgets. When you add them, it's pretty easy to fill up the screen. So the widgets do give you very good functionality, but if you want to have apps on the external screen, you have to enable it in the lab section. Fortunately, the option does exist, but they are slightly more limited applications. However, remember that by installing Good Lock and then installing the multi-star module within the I Love Foldables section, you can force all apps to open from this screen with a new Good Lock widget. So once you install this and do all that configuration process, yes, you could use any application on this external screen, which is very convenient. In fact, from my point of view, it's something that Samsung should let the user enable much more easily and not make life so complicated. But obviously, having a somewhat square screen, some apps may not adapt very well, but most will. However, messaging apps can have the keyboard getting in the way of most of the system. And in this case, although Samsung does offer the hide keyboard button or go back and home key in this small area of the tab, it won't actually offer us multitasking as we do see on Motorola, for example, to go backwards with gestures or to navigate all the apps we have open. So the functionalities are a bit more limited. If you are using some multimedia application, you can also enable a widget to have control of that music or whatever you are playing directly from the external screen. And with respect to the applications that adapt in flex mode, I already showed you that the camera is perfectly adapted, but in this case also the gallery, for example, has this behavior where we will find the full control in the half of the screen that remains at the bottom and the display area in the half of the screen that remains at the top. Inside the web browser, there is also something very curious because you could force to use a touch panel at the bottom as if it were a kind of computer. So you get a cursor that can be useful at very specific times. I'm not saying you're going to use it constantly, but there are pages that are still not well adapted for viewing on a cell phone, and with this you could somehow use the cursor as if you were on a computer. Instagram, for example, yes, it is adapted so that when you have this flex mode, the viewing area is put in the middle of the top screen, and the same thing will happen with the calendar, with the calculator, so it is a very well adapted operating system for this flex mode. In Spotify and other media apps, you could force this flex mode within the system options so that you also get controls at this bottom part, although they are not completely tailored to the app, but Samsung has managed to show you this options panel here. However, each developer can adapt their applications, and such is the case of YouTube, where, for example, it does have an adapted behavior here, and if you have YouTube Premium, more controls will still appear available in the lower half of the screen. However, apps like Netflix and other streaming apps are not going to adapt as YouTube does, for example. But if you wanted to have a kind of stand to watch Netflix or some other movies, you could use the external screen by opening the apps from Good Lock, and you can continue the playback of your content simply this way with the device standing upright. As for video calling apps, we also see good news because yes, it is adapted, for example, WhatsApp. So if you are on a video call, it is also comfortable to simply fold the cell phone and leave the video call active while the camera is coming to you. And the same thing is going to happen with other apps like Zoom, Google Meet, and Microsoft Teams. So really, Samsung could say that it has achieved the perfect optimization for its foldable. Of course, there are still more applications that could be adapted, but at least today I consider that many applications are well adapted to take advantage of the benefits of having a foldable device. In terms of security, Samsung offers us a side fingerprint reader that is a bit thin. I do not like it so much. I would like a little more space for a much more accurate reading, not to complain too much. The truth is that it does work well, only that we are limited to 4 registrations when most smartphones have 5 registrations, so you have to choose very well who you are going to register. It also has facial recognition, but it's only in 2 dimensions. It has Google Extended Unlock to stay unlocked in certain trusted environments. It has Samsung Pass to have all your passwords, login information, and even confidential notes stored there, so you can insert all of this directly from the Samsung keyboard by verifying by your fingerprint. It is a tool that I consider very useful. It also includes the secure folder to keep images, videos, or applications there. And remember that this secure folder can be customized to change the icon and disguise it. There is also a dual messenger option that allows you to clone WhatsApp, for example, and have 2 accounts on the same cell phone. It also includes secure Wi-Fi, which is Samsung's own VPN. This is important because other manufacturers do not include it. So when you connect to a public Wi-Fi network, you can activate this secure Wi-Fi option so that no one will intercept your information. It also includes the automatic blocker option that with a single switch can disable several options that could put you at risk if you are not a very experienced user. On the other hand, if you know what you are doing, you could perfectly disable it to install applications from external sources and other things. It also includes Samsung Kids, with which you can have specific sessions for children with applications that are appropriate to their level depending on which ones you authorize. Obviously, to get out of this mode, they need to verify that it is an authorized person, so it might help to lend your cell phone to little ones. And in addition to Google Play Protect, it also has a partnership with McAfee, so you can be aware of any malware that wants to sneak into your phone. And finally, if you ever lose your phone, you not only have Google's network to try to find it, but also Samsung's network, so you have a little more possibilities. The battery has a capacity of 4,000 milliampere hours. That's an increase over the last generation. And in conjunction with the processor change, we definitely did see an improvement in the battery. In my close-up drain test, it performed similar to last generation. There wasn't as much of an improvement there, but it did exceed 4 hours, which makes it very close to the performance that other smartphones with 5 milliamp batteries have. So I honestly don't think that's going to make you suffer. The battery currently has reached a good level of maturity, but in my background drain test, it did show a very significant evolution over the last generation, as it gave me an hour and a half more than the Galaxy Z Flip 5. Samsung has shown that it optimizes its operating system very well so that apps that are running in the background don't consume as much power without necessarily shutting down completely. So very good news in this regard. Obviously, it also has a saver mode that you could use to try to extend this lifetime, and it has an ultra saver mode that you could use in emergencies, and it also allows you to add some apps that you consider essential. It does support 25-watt charging, but you know the charger is sold separately, and that's definitely something that's very annoying. But if you finally manage to purchase the original charger, you're going to notice that it has a fast charge, especially in the first stage. In 15 minutes, it got up to 30%. In 30 minutes, it got up to 56%. And within an hour, it was up to 93%. But after that, you start to slow the charge down a lot to try to take care of the battery. So the full charge from 0 to 100 was finished in 1 hour and 20 minutes. You should know that it also has wireless charging, although if your wireless charger gets very hot, it is best not to use that feature. And it also has reversible wireless charging, so you could charge your Galaxy Buds or some other accessories on the back of this cell phone. But if you didn't know, neither the Galaxy Watch Ultra nor the Galaxy Watch 7, which are Samsung's newest watches, can be charged here. And with respect to the battery protection mechanisms, it does include a sort of smart charging that's going to turn on your routine, and it's going to charge much slower if you leave it charging overnight. Or you also have the maximum protection level that blocks charging at 80%, useful for users who need to always have their device plugged in. In connectivity, it has almost everything we could ask for. That is, it has 5G as expected. It also supports eSIM, so that when traveling, you can simply scan a QR code instead of having to go buy a physical SIM card, which is very useful for travelers. And it also allows you to select which apps will be able to connect to the internet with your mobile data and which apps can only do so over Wi-Fi, so you have good control. It also supports Wi-Fi 6E for lightning-fast download speeds. And again, this can be useful for travelers if you're suddenly about to travel and you want to download an episode of Netflix or an album on Spotify. You can download it very quickly. And it has Bluetooth 5.3 with good stability. Although it's not the latest, it also has NFC, so you can set up your card with Google Pay and make mobile payments just by bringing your cell phone close to the bank terminal. It doesn't have FM radio, although that's to be expected in expensive devices. And it doesn't have Samsung DeX either. This is a big deal because most expensive Samsung devices have this feature, but in this case you can only project your screen in mirrored format with Smart View, which somehow allows you a bit more advanced projection, so that, for example, you can project just one application while you do anything else on your cell phone and the like, but you don't have the windowed view like you can with Samsung DeX. You can also project completely mirrored via cable, which gives you a good level of stability, and it obviously has Android Auto, and the USB-C port is 3.2 Gen 1. And in the sensors, we find everything a cell phone needs, including a pressure sensor, which is usually rare, but there's also the geomagnetic field sensor, the gyroscope, although the proximity sensor seems to be a contact sensor and not a proximity sensor, but at least it's not a virtual sensor. In the ecosystem, we will have good news. You know that Samsung is usually an expert in this section, so not only will it offer a good catalog of devices such as Galaxy Buds, Galaxy Watch, even Galaxy Ring and Galaxy Tab, but it also offers a good level of interaction between them. For example, from the watch you can take pictures, from the watch you could also turn off the cell phone alarms, you could use your cell phone from your tablet, receive cell phone calls on the tablet, and also advanced things, but the detail is that Samsung is not focusing much on laptops. So although it does have the Galaxy Book in some countries, most countries do not have access to this computer, and neither does it have an application that you can install on any other computer of any other brand for advanced connectivity. It does have connectivity through the official Microsoft Windows tool, but it is still not as advanced as we would like, so the cell phone computer interaction is a bit more limited compared to other brands. Samsung has a very strong partnership with Microsoft, which is also demonstrated by integrating OneDrive directly into the gallery, so you can back up all your photos there, or you can back them up to Google Photos as well. And it also includes SmartThings, so you can control all your home devices in one app. In fact, SmartThings offers very good compatibility, and in this aspect you are going to notice that Samsung offers a far superior experience than other brands that rely entirely on Google Home. The processor of this device is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 for Galaxy, so we find very good power without a doubt. It comes with 12 GB of RAM, which is very good news because the last generation had only 8, so this is going to theoretically allow for superior performance when you have multiple applications open. It's also going to offer you virtual RAM, which we'll see in a moment, and 256 GB of storage on its base model, but it doesn't support microSD. By all accounts, it took 1.8 seconds on average to open each application. I think it's one of the fastest devices I've tested, at least in terms of opening apps. However, it still shows these white screenshots that have been present on Galaxy devices for a long time. It seems that these white screenshots don't always come up, but Samsung doesn't quite optimize this. There you saw also another small screenshot. It does not completely restart the application, but it can be a bit annoying when switching between different applications. When navigating within applications, we should also have a good fluency and good fluidity. The truth is that it does not feel 100% fluid, as it should be such an expensive device, but in general terms I think it is fine, and surely it can be optimized over time. For now, the speed of opening applications has impressed me. The navigation within the applications, I still don't perceive it to be up to what it should be. And with regard to app sharing, we do seem to find something positive after all. Only in some moments there are some annoying screenshots like the one you just saw. And as I was telling you a moment ago, we also find virtual RAM. In this case, another 8 GB added, which is very clear to us that they are actually useless because we would supposedly find 20 GB of RAM. But still, we see this kind of screenshots when we are switching between applications that are not so comfortable. Although I insist they do not always appear, but there are certain applications that do show us screenshots that are not at all pleasant. Let's test now how it exports a video with a total duration of 1 minute using clips recorded with this device in 4K resolution, and that's it. It took less than 20 seconds, confirming that it is an exaggeratedly powerful device. It is very fast. Hopefully Samsung will finish optimizing the system so that all this power can be distinguished and recognized even when you have many applications open. For games, we will find the Gaming Hub, where we also find a catalog of games that we can use without installing, so we could play without consuming storage. Although obviously they will be simpler games, but we also have access to the catalog of installed games. And by the way, within the Game Booster settings, we are going to find also some other tools and configurations of our games. For example, you might enable a touch protection or a lock. While that lock is on, you can also select to have the screen lower its frames per second rate so that it doesn't consume as much battery. You can enable a special shortcut bar, or you can also have a quick floating shortcut of any of these tools. We will also find settings for the screenshot, and in this case, within the Labs section, there is an option to force the device to have a little more power when playing, although it does warn us that it will get hotter. So in our case, we tried it and we really did see an increase in the power of the game. That is, when you enable this option, the game runs much better, but it does get warmer, so we kept it enabled for our subsequent tests. Remember that you could also select a refresh rate of when playing the game to consume less battery. Or you could also select the pause charging setting via USB power delivery, so the charger current will go straight to the processor without going through the battery. This avoids overheating. And when opening a game, you will have several tools available, in this case through a bar as previously configured, so we can temporarily lock the screen so that it does not consume as much energy while it is downloading some content our game. We will also find a button to lock the navigation bar, another button to take screenshots, also screen recordings, and finally one more button to open an application in a floating mode so that without having to leave our game we can answer a message or something similar. Also note that by pressing the 3 additional dots we can open the priority mode and some additional information, in addition to accessing the plugins that we can download. Remember that these are plugins that you can install separately. Some of them allow you, for example, to modify the performance of the device depending on whether you prefer to have a lower power setting or you are more interested in having the highest possible power. So here you can customize in a very specific way the performance of each game, and there are also other plugins like a virtual scope for shooting games that you can fully customize, also some timers or a frames per second monitor and tools that we have seen previously in other Galaxy. In Call of Duty, this device supports very high graphics quality at maximum rate by default, but maximum graphics quality is also available and ultra frame rate is also available, although by selecting this rate, the graphics quality drops. So first we select the maximum graphics quality and notice that virtually all real-time effects are available, showing a very good compatibility with this chip. If you give priority to the refresh rate, several effects will not be available yet. Giving priority to the graphic quality, we are going to notice that the performance is going to be good in terms of the experience we have in this game, but the temperature is high and in fact it does not show a very good level of stability either. So in a way it confirms us that it is still not a device very focused on gaming, despite the fact that for the first time in a Galaxy Z Flip Samsung incorporates a Steam camera. In fact, it's possible that the vapor chamber has somehow caused the feel on this external stage to feel a bit warmer as well, but it doesn't seem to be able to cool the processor that much because it doesn't seem to have such a high stability anyway. So it is really not that attractive tool for gaming, even though its widescreen format can give you a more pleasant feeling in this kind of games. Giving priority to the refresh rate, we will notice that it still has some small drops in the frames that do not go below 60, but that can be perceived in some environments, especially if you like to play too much. I insist, it is not a device totally dedicated to gaming, although it is not a disappointment, but obviously there will be devices very focused on games that will give you a completely superior performance. Here the detail is still the temperature, which honestly is quite high to be testing just this game. In the case of Legends, we changed the automatic setting to an ultra setting at 60 frames per second, and as usual in this case the game started up to 120 frames per second, but it actually had several hiccups. So then it intelligently adjusted to 60 frames per second, and after that it maintained very good stabilization. So here we didn't see so many fluctuations, but it should be noted that the temperature went up to 47.6 degrees Celsius in the external area, so we're also going to note that it's not a device that's able to stay very cool when you're playing at this level of graphics quality. Possibly if you play with a slightly lower level, you can get to have a calmer experience in terms of temperature. In the SpongeBob game, both the resolution and the quality are by default on high, but for the test we raised it up to epic since it is a very expensive device. And in this case, it is curious that the experience was completely good. It seems that this game is a little more optimized for this processor because it did not come to cost too much, while on other devices we have seen that this game is very complicated. So it is quite curious performance. In fact, here it did not get to heat up as much as in others. So I insist that if you are not totally demanding in the world of gaming, you will have a good experience. On the other hand, if you are more demanding, you will feel that at times its stability drops or it heats up more than usual, but for most people this performance will be more than enough. In Genshin Impact, by default, it gives us the high graphic quality. In this case, for the test, we turned it up to very high at 60 frames per second, and also the blurring we set it as high as possible. And again, the same thing I was telling you is repeated. That is, if you are one of the most demanding, you will probably perceive more hindrances or more instability than usual, while if you are a more casual player, you will perceive a good experience. Here the detail is that the heating does become quite annoying, so it will not be advisable to play at very high qualities because, for example, in this case it was very close to 50 degrees Celsius on the outer cover, which is definitely already very annoying. In fact, after some time playing with this level, the device automatically adjusted to 45 frames per second to avoid further heating. Although, by the way, also this temperature is while recording the screen. If you don't record the screen, you may have a slightly lower temperature level, although the fluidity is still exactly the same. And just as a fun fact, note that you could play this content from the external screen, which is unlikely that you will do, but only if you are wondering. Even if you respond by having 2 fingers on the screen. So for the time being, this has been all regarding Samsung's Galaxy Z Flip 6. I hope you liked this video. I think you would have to wait until the next generation if you already currently have the Galaxy Z Flip 5, because I don't really feel that a switch is warranted. However, if you're not considering switching from the Z Flip 5 to the Z Flip 6 and you're about to release a foldable, also consider the Galaxy Z Flip 5 as a better option because it will likely be cheaper. For now, we've come to the end of this video. If you liked it, you know you can let us know, and we'll see you next time.